Have you ever felt like your emotions are out of control? Fear that paralyzes, anger that explodes, anxiety that keeps you restless. It seems like we're living in an emotional whirlwind that pulls us further and further away from the peace we so desperately seek. And here comes a discomforting question. Could it be that we're allowing our emotions to distance us from God? Don't worry, this isn't about guilt or blame, but about understanding something essential that few talk about. Jesus already knew you'd face these struggles. He didn't just talk about them. He left powerful teachings on how to handle each one. Interestingly, while the modern world pushes us to suppress or ignore our feelings, Jesus invites us to something radically different, to transform our emotions into tools that bring us closer to God. He understood that negative emotions like fear, envy, or doubt could become prisons, but also realized that, with faith and purpose, they could turn into opportunities for spiritual growth. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? After all, who would imagine that even a moment of anger could lead us to reflect God's love? If you're searching for answers, you've come to the right place. Let's explore together what Jesus teaches us about these emotions that so often cause us to stumble. Get ready to learn how faith can calm the storms in your heart, how forgiveness can bring freedom, and how trusting in God's plan can transform even the deepest doubts. What you're about to discover isn't just theory. It's a real invitation to experience a deeper connection with God. Fear. Who hasn't felt that shiver down their spine when facing the unknown? It's human to be afraid. But Jesus showed us that while this emotion is common, it shouldn't control us. Remember the storm on the sea in Matthew 8 verses 23 to 27. The disciples were terrified, thinking they would perish. And Jesus, with all his calm, asked, "Why are you so afraid, you of little faith?" This is where his wisdom guides us. Fear often stems from a lack of trust in God. Faith is the powerful antidote to facing our daily storms, whether they are financial, emotional, or spiritual. When fear strikes, our first instinct is often to run or avoid the situation. But Jesus teaches the opposite, to confront it. Want a practical example? The next time you feel afraid, stop and pray. Prayer is like an invisible shield. Imagine handing your worries over to God, saying, "Lord, I can't, but I trust that you can." This changes everything. Make it a habit. Before a job interview, a medical exam, or even a difficult conversation, pray. You'll see how faith begins to calm the waves in your heart. Another lesson Jesus gives us is about action. It's not enough to just pray and wait. Faith requires movement. If you're afraid of losing your job, trust God but also update your resume. If you're afraid of illness, consult a doctor and take care of your body as God's temple. See how faith and action go hand in hand. And when the waves seem even bigger, remember that Jesus is in the boat with you, and he has calmed greater storms before. Lack of faith. It's something many carry in their hearts, often without even realizing it. But Jesus was clear in Matthew 17 verse 20. Even faith as small as a mustard seed can move mountains. Incredible, isn't it? This shows us that God doesn't demand perfect faith, but practical faith, a trust that allows us to take small steps even in the face of overwhelming challenges. And let's face it, who hasn't looked at a problem and thought, "This is way too big for me"? Jesus reminds us that God is bigger than any challenge. If you've ever felt paralyzed by a lack of faith, know that you're not alone. The disciples also doubted, even while walking alongside Jesus. The secret? Putting trust into action. Imagine a father teaching his child to ride a bike. The child might doubt, but as long as he trusts the father holding the seat, he moves forward. It's the same with God. Try practicing this trust in everyday situations. Feeling hopeless? Start by giving thanks for something small. Gratitude is a powerful tool to awaken faith. Another important point is feeding your faith. Have you heard that faith comes by hearing? That's in Romans 10 verse 17. Reading the Bible regularly, listening to teachings, and connecting with people who share the same faith helps strengthen your trust in God. Start with one verse a day. And if doubt persists, that's okay. God doesn't distance himself because of it. He understands our struggles, and, just as he did with Thomas, he's willing to extend his hand so we can see and believe. Anger, that fiery emotion that seems to take over in an instant, can be both a warning and a trap. Jesus, in Matthew 5 verse 22, warned us, "Anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." He doesn't condemn the emotion itself, but shows us that the problem lies in what we do with it. Anger can be transformed into something positive if we use it as motivation for justice rather than reacting impulsively. Think of how often a conflict escalates because we let words fly unfiltered. A practical example: when you feel angry, try pausing for 10 seconds before responding. It may seem simple, but this pause allows you to reassess your words and actions. Jesus taught us to seek reconciliation even before offering our gift at the altar. Matthew 5 verses 23 to 24. This means God values restored relationships more than outward rituals. Try writing a message or making a call to someone you've had a disagreement with. A simple "I'm sorry" can open doors to peace. And when anger feels too overwhelming to control, pray. It might sound basic, but it works. Remember how Jesus, even when unjustly accused and crucified, chose to forgive, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23 verse 34. Imagine the impact of adopting this posture in your life. It may not be easy at first, but with practice, you'll realize that anger doesn't have to be a prison. Compassion and forgiveness are the keys Jesus gave us to escape this emotional cell. Envy, an emotion that might seem harmless, but silently erodes the peace in our hearts. Jesus, in Luke 12 verse 15, was straightforward. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. He teaches us that envy arises from comparison and a lack of contentment with what God has given us. When we look at others' lives and forget to value our own blessings, we fall into the trap of measuring our worth by what we possess. But how can we deal with envy? The first step is to recognize and be grateful. A simple yet powerful exercise is to create a daily gratitude list. Take a notebook and write down 3 things you are grateful for. It could be a friend, a moment of peace, or something as simple as a warm cup of coffee in the morning. This habit helps shift the focus from what's missing to what God has already provided. Gratitude opens the door to contentment, showing that true wealth lies in God's presence in our lives. Another important point is trusting in God's unique plan. Each of us has a different journey, and comparing ourselves to others devalues the path God has chosen for us. When envy arises, remember that the blessings you see in others' lives don't diminish what God has prepared for you. On the contrary, they are a reminder of God's generosity, and that, in His perfect timing, He brings the best to each of us. The key is to trust and walk in faith, even when the path ahead seems unclear. Pride, anxiety, doubt. 3 emotions that seem so different, yet often walk hand in hand, distancing us from God and His teachings. Pride, for example, can make us believe we're self-sufficient, ignoring our dependence on God. Jesus, in Matthew 23 verse 11, gave us a clear reminder. The greatest among you will be your servant. Serving is an act that frees us from ego and draws us closer to God. Start small. Help someone with a simple task. Listen to someone who needs to vent, or even make a silent donation. These actions teach us humility and connect us to God's heart. And what about anxiety? This is an emotion that consumes us. Jesus knew this and gave us advice that may seem challenging, but is profoundly liberating. Do not worry about your life. Matthew 6 verses 25 to 34. He invites us to live one day at a time, trusting that God will provide. If anxiety is a constant companion, take a few minutes each day to breathe and reflect on God's promises. A helpful practice is to meditate on Psalm 23, a text that reminds us that the Lord is our shepherd, and we lack nothing. As for doubt, this subtle emotion can make us question even God's goodness. Remember Thomas? He doubted until he saw Jesus' wounds. John 20 verses 24 to 29. And what did Jesus do? Reject him? No, He extended His hand. God understands our inner struggles and is always willing to strengthen us. A practical way to deal with doubt is to seek answers in the Bible or talk to someone with mature faith. Questioning isn't wrong. Staying in doubt is what keeps us from moving forward. Jesus calls us to something extraordinary, to transform our emotions into tools for growth and a closer relationship with God. He never said we'd be immune to feelings like fear, anger, or doubt, but he showed us that these emotions don't have to define us. Think of the Holy Spirit as that wise friend who guides us at the right moment. When our hearts are heavy, Jesus invites us, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11 verse 28. This is the starting point, recognizing that we don't have to carry everything alone. Transforming emotions requires intention. For example, fear can become courage. By facing what intimidates us with the certainty that God is with us. Try starting something new, even if fear tries to stop you. A course, a project, or even a long-postponed conversation. Anger, when channeled correctly, becomes fuel for reconciliation. Think about those moments when forgiveness seems impossible. By practicing forgiveness, you not only follow Jesus' teachings, but also lighten the weight in your own soul. And what about doubt? This can be the gateway to deeper faith. Doubt pushes us to seek answers, and Jesus never rebuked anyone for wanting to understand more. He extended his hand to Thomas, and will do the same for us. When you feel your faith being challenged, invest in knowledge. Read books about Jesus' teachings, join Bible study groups, or listen to inspiring sermons. In doing so, you transform doubt into a catalyst for spiritual growth. If you've made it this far, it's because something has touched your heart. Perhaps it was the way Jesus dealt with emotions or his call to transform what seems impossible into victory. But pause and reflect. What are you doing today with the emotions that dominate your life? Are you letting them pull you away from God? Or are you ready to use them as a bridge to a deeper connection with him? The choice is yours. And yes, it starts now. What would happen if, at this very moment, you handed over your worries, doubts, and hurts to God? It seems simple but could be revolutionary. Start small. Take 5 minutes a day to meditate on his word, pray for wisdom, or even write down what you're feeling in a journal. These simple actions can transform your perspective and bring your life more in line with Jesus' teachings. After all, he didn't promise a life without struggles, but assured us that we'd be safe in his presence. Now, let me challenge you. What emotion is stopping you from fully living out the purpose God has for you? Think about it and decide today to break the chains holding your heart. Remember, Jesus calls us to live with faith, courage, and compassion. Don't let fear, doubt, or pride be bigger than God's love for you. It's time to act. And speaking of action, how about continuing this journey of learning? Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and share this content with those you love. Together, we can dive deeper into the Bible, Jesus' teachings, and how to transform our lives. Are you ready to take the next step?